At 7:45 a.m., I opened the doors to a building dedicated to building, yet only breaks me down. I march down hallways cleaned up after me every day by regular janitors, but I never had the decency to honor their names. Lockers left open like teenage boys' mouths when teenage girls wear clothes that covers their insecurities but exposes everything else. Teachers pay less than what it cost them to be here. Oceans of adolescents come here to receive lessons but never learn to swim. Part like the Red Sea when the bell rings. This is a training ground.
One of the most resounding pieces of advice that my dad has given me came to me when we were sitting in traffic on Colfax. I was a freshman and was having a difficult time adapting to my new life in the high school training ground. And a question had risen in my mind. Why? Why have I been subjected to such a miserable, pedantic, uninspired existence? Who made the life of a high schooler so boring? My dad quietly listened to my complaints, and after my irritation deflated, he had only this to offer. He said, "I don't know why it's this way, but as an American living a comfortable life, it's your job. There are kids your age in Zambia whose job is to carry barrels of water to their villages every morning, and your job is to go to school, and that's just the way it is." It was a truth that I didn't like, but that I couldn't disagree with. High school is a training ground, and our job, as students, is to be trained for an industrializing society in a post-industrial age. Our job is to learn how to be obedient, confident in the abilities of our superiors instead of ourselves, and incapable of innovation. Although capitalism is reaping the benefits of this training ground, the public education system is no longer equipped to help students become successful in the new age of society, and the institution needs to change for there to be any hope for the future. The beginnings of publicly funded compulsory education is a portion of U.S. history that is often glossed over. Horace Mann, who is considered the father of public education, was born in 1796 in Franklin, Massachusetts. His time as a politician between 1827 and 1853 was dedicated to education reform. Facing a deteriorating and fragmented education system, the Massachusetts legislature created the country's first Board of Education, with Horace Mann as secretary. The board decided to structure the new education system similarly to the acclaimed Prussian structure of schools, as popularly described by French philosopher Victor Cousin in his book Report on the State of Public Instruction in Prussia. In Prussia, as in other states, public instruction long formed a part of the business of the Minister of the Interior. It was not until 1819 that a special department of administration was consecrated to this object, with Baron von Altenstein at its head. I regard this change of the highest importance. In the first place, the service is much better performed, there being a complete unity in the central point, and the authority, being more cogent, is better obeyed. Horace Mann and the Board of Education saw this as an imperative first step. Schools must be regulated by the state and made to be homogeneous in content, so that the state would have control over what the students did and did not learn. The other important policy adopted by the Massachusetts Board was that of compulsory learning, described by Victor Cousin as such. This duty is so national, so rooted in all the legal and moral habits of the country, that it is expressed by a single word, Schulpflichtigkeit, school duty or school obligation. It is completely characteristic of Prussia. They contain the secret of its originality as a nation, of its power as a state, and germ of its future condition. Little did Victor Cousin nor Horace Mann know that the germ of Prussia's future condition would manifest in the unification of surrounding areas to form Germany, and give rise to the Nazi Party under Adolf Hitler, who once famously said, "He alone who owns the youth gains the future." Ultimately, the American public education system was created for the express purpose of centralizing control of the intellectual and moral development of its students, and making it the job of the youth to go to school, as my dad had described it to me in my first month of freshman year. With the Prussian model of education developing in the States, schools focused on preparing students for the new wave of industrialization that had reached the shores of the Northeast. And the issue, according to education reformer Sir Ken Robinson, is that this model has yet to adapt to the new post-industrial world.
I'll give you a couple of examples. Schools are still pretty much organized on factory lines, so ringing bells, separate facilities, specialized into separate subjects. We still educate children by batches. We put them through the system by age group. Why do we do that? Why is there this assumption that the most important thing kids have in common is how old they are? It's like the most important thing about them is their date of manufacture. You know what I mean? Well, I know kids who are much better than other kids at the same age in different disciplines, or at different times of the day, or better in smaller groups than in large groups, or sometimes they want to be on their own. If you're interested in the model of learning, you don't start from this production line mentality. It's essentially about conformity, and increasingly it's about that as you look at the growth of standardized testing and standardized curricula. And it's about standardization. I believe we've got to go in the exact opposite direction. That's what I mean about changing the paradigm.
The industrialization of education may have been beneficial to us at the time of the Industrial Revolution, but in modern society, where we are becoming increasingly dependent on new discoveries and innovation to solve the ecological and economical crises that we face, we need a robust and creative populace that can meet such demands, which is a populace that the industrialized education system is consistently failing to deliver. The key to innovation and creativity has been associated with a cognizant skill called divergent thinking, a skill that has proven to degrade among children across time. Where an IQ test would measure a person's convergent thinking, the ability to reach a singular answer from a variety of sources, a divergent test measures a person's ability to reach a variety of conclusions from a singular source or prompt. Malcolm Gladwell writes in his book Outliers, "What the test giver is looking for are the number and the uniqueness of your responses. And what the test is measuring isn't analytical intelligence, but something profoundly different, something much closer to creativity." In a study published in George Land and Beth Jarman's book Breakpoint and Beyond, Mastering the Future Today, 98% of kindergartners achieved what would be considered a genius level of divergent reasoning. This number, however, sharply decreases to 32% of 8 to 10-year-olds, 10% of 13 to 15-year-olds, and only 2% of adults able to be considered a genius in divergent thinking.
Now, a lot of things have happened to these kids as they've grown up. A lot. But one of the most important things that happened to them, I'm convinced, is that by now they've become educated. They've spent 10 years at school being told there's one answer, it's at the back. And don't look.
As a high school student, I find this data to be completely believable. As I was shooting footage for this documentary, my peers were confused and alarmed by what I was doing, bringing a camera into my classes, asking me why on earth I would go out of my way to make a documentary when I could have simply written a research paper on the same topic. School is extremely quantitative achievement oriented. Students care much more about what the most efficient ends are than what the most creative means are, whether it's getting an A in a class or submitting the perfect application to colleges, with a good enough transcript and just enough community involvement to get them in. For our society to prosper, we need to have the motivation and capabilities to go far above and beyond all expectation, and be able to be authentic and creative in the face of adversity. Clearly, the public education system has some major catching up to do in order to compete on a global scale, with countries such as Finland and South Korea consistently beating the US in test scores, dropout, and graduation rates. We have an education system designed to send children to prosper on factory floors, when such an occupation is no longer useful nor beneficial to the American public. We need to reimagine what education looks like so that it nourishes the creative and unique talents of every student and caters to their individual strengths in the classroom, the result being a world where everybody comprehends the possibility that they can operate at their highest and most authentic selves, ready to go out into the world and change it for the better. There's a poem by 13th century poet Rumi that says, "Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there's a field. I'll meet you there." When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense. As a student and as a person, I've come to identify myself as somebody searching for Rumi's field, in spite of the job that my dad prescribed to me years ago. And my hope is that one day my son will understand me on his first day of high school when I tell him, "I'll meet you there. I'll meet you there."
Mornings come, you watch the red sunrise. The LED still flickers in your eyes. Oh, you ought to spare your face the razor, because no one's gonna spare the time for you. No one's gonna watch you as you go from a house you didn't build and can't control. Oh, you ought to spare your face the razor, because no one's gonna spare the time for you. You ought to spare the world your labor. It's been 20 years and no one's told the truth.